We have been taught that time flows in one direction, like an arrow shot from the bow of the past, traveling in a straight and unwavering line through the present and into an unknown future. This is a fundamental assumption of our reality, a law of physics that we are told is as certain and as constant as gravity itself. But what if that arrow is broken? What if the very flow of time that we experience, with its irregular years, its drifting seasons, its chaotic and clumsy need for constant human correction in the form of leap years, is not the natural, original state of the universe at all? What if it is a symptom, a cosmic fever, a chronic illness contracted from a primordial wound that has scarred the very fabric of our reality? The sacred 364-day calendar, a subject we have previously explored as a lost system of covenantal worship, is in fact much more than that. It is a clue. It is a fossilized fingerprint, a ghostly echo of a different kind of reality, a different set of physical laws. It is the ghost of a perfect celestial clock that once governed a world of unshakable mathematical order. A world that existed in a state of physical and temporal perfection before the time of Adam. Today, we are not just investigating theology. We are investigating the forbidden physics of a lost universe. We will present the evidence that the 364-day calendar was not just a way to measure time, but was a direct and literal reflection of time itself. A physical law of celestial mechanics that was shattered in the first and greatest cosmic cataclysm. And in doing so, we will reveal the hidden truth that we are all living in the subtle but pervasive aftermath of a broken reality, a universe whose very clock was wounded at the dawn of time. Before we can investigate the crime that broke the clock, we must first remind ourselves of the evidence of its original, perfect state. The 364-day calendar, as meticulously detailed in the uncensored chronicles of Enoch and Jubilees, is not just a quaint or interesting alternative to our own system. It is a work of divine, mathematical genius, a system of such perfect and interlocking symmetry that it bears the unmistakable fingerprint of a grand designer. Let us briefly recap the evidence. The foundation of its perfection is its unwavering allegiance to the number 7, the biblical number of divine completion. A year of 364 days is perfectly divisible by 7, yielding exactly 52 7-day weeks. This is the cornerstone of its stability. Unlike our Gregorian calendar, where the days of the week shift forward by 1 or 2 days each year, the sacred calendar is eternally consistent. There are no leftover days, no awkward fractions. The Sabbath is a fixed, immovable anchor in the flow of time, a constant that never drifts. This perfection extends to the seasons. The year is divided into 4 equal quarters of exactly 91 days each. And 91 in the divine equation is also perfectly divisible by 7, meaning each season contains exactly 13 weeks. This creates a flawless harmony between the weekly rhythm of life and worship and the annual rhythm of the cosmos. The first day of spring, summer, fall, and winter always falls on the same day of the week, year after year, century after century. This is a system that requires no human intervention. There is no clumsy, man-made patch like a leap year. There is no slow, almost imperceptible drift against the solstices. It is a self-contained, self-regulating, and perfectly predictable machine. But this very perfection raises a profound and troubling question. If God designed a system of time this elegant, this mathematically perfect, Why is it so conspicuously absent from the canonical Book of Genesis? And more importantly, why does it seem to not quite fit the physical reality of the world we now inhabit? The answer to that question is not that the clock was wrong. The answer is that the universe itself has been broken. To understand how this perfect clock could have been a physical reality, we must once again turn to the testimony of our primary eyewitness to the primordial world, the prophet Enoch. When Enoch was taken on his great tour of the 10 heavens, he was not just shown theological truths, he was shown celestial mechanics. His book is not just a work of prophecy, it is a work of cosmic engineering. He does not just tell us that the calendar works, he shows us the very machinery that makes it work. In the 72nd chapter of his book, Enoch is given a detailed, guided tour of the laws of the sun. He is not given a poetic description, he is given an architectural blueprint. He describes a series of 6 great portals or gates in the east from which the sun rises, and 6 corresponding gates in the west into which it sets. These are not metaphorical gates, they are described as specific architectural features of the celestial sphere. The angel Uriel, his guide, then explains how the sun's journey through these specific gates throughout the year creates the changing lengths of day and night. The sun spends a designated number of days rising and setting in each pair of gates, its path precisely controlled, its journey perfectly regulated. The result of this intricate celestial architecture, Enoch is told, is a solar year of exactly 364 days. He is then shown a similar system for the moon, with its own gates and its own regulated path. A path that creates a lunar year that is shorter than the solar year, a fact that ancient astronomers were well aware of. The Book of Enoch is not describing a primitive, flat Earth cosmology. It is describing a complex, geocentric model of a universe that is a finely tuned architectural machine. It is a cosmos that has been physically and structurally engineered to produce, with unwavering precision, a perfect 364-day year. The calendar was not an abstract religious idea. According to Enoch, it was the direct and observable output of the physical architecture of the heavens. Enoch's testimony about the physical architecture of the heavens leads us to the central, revolutionary, and forbidden hypothesis of our investigation. We have been conditioned to see the 364-day calendar as a religious or ceremonial system, a man-made attempt to approximate the true solar year of 365 and a quarter days. But what if we have had it completely backwards? What if the 364-day calendar is not the approximation? What if our current messy 365? 25-day year is the approximation, a damaged and corrupted version of a once perfect original. Let us dare to ask the question that modern science and theology have both refused to consider. What if, in the original unfallen creation, the world that existed before the cosmic rebellion of Lucifer, the physical orbit of the Earth around the Sun was exactly 364 days? What if the sacred calendar was not a religious invention designed to track a flawed physical reality? What if it was a perfect scientific description of a perfect physical reality? In this model, the 364-day year was not just a prophetic year or a ceremonial year. It was the literal year. It was a fundamental law of physics in the primordial creation, a temporal constant that was as foundational to that reality as the speed of light is to ours. The perfect mathematical symmetry of the calendar, the 52 perfect weeks, the 4 equal seasons of 91 days, was not just a clever human arrangement. It was a direct reflection of a perfect, stable, and divinely engineered celestial mechanics. This is a breathtaking and paradigm-shattering idea. It suggests that the very laws of physics, the fundamental constants of time and space, are not immutable. It suggests that they can be and have been damaged by acts of spiritual rebellion. It reframes the 364-day calendar from a piece of religious history into a piece of physical evidence, a fossilized record of a lost law of nature from a universe that was once far more perfect and far more orderly than our own. If we dare to entertain this forbidden hypothesis that the primordial Earth had a perfect 364-day orbit, then we must also explore the profound physical implications of such a reality. What would a world with a perfect, circular, and stable orbit actually be like? The answer, when we consult the laws of physics, is a description of a planet that is hauntingly familiar to the one described in the opening chapters of Genesis. Our current, slightly chaotic 365.25-day year is the result of an elliptical, not a circular, orbit. And the extreme seasons we experience, the harsh winters and the scorching summers, are primarily the result of our planet's axial tilt, an inclination of approximately 23.5 degrees. This tilt is what causes different parts of the Earth to receive more or less direct sunlight throughout the year. But a world with a perfect 364-day orbit, a world whose celestial mechanics were in a state of perfect divine harmony, would almost certainly not have had this significant axial tilt. A planet in a stable, circular orbit with its axis perpendicular to its orbital plane would be a world without extreme seasons. It would not be a world of punishing winters and blistering summers. It would be a world of near-constant, gentle and life-giving spring. The temperature would be remarkably stable across the globe. The growth cycles of plants would be uninterrupted. The entire planet would exist in a state of perpetual, garden-like perfection. Does this sound familiar? This is not just a poetic fantasy. It is a scientifically plausible description of a global Eden. The Book of Genesis tells us that before the fall, the entire earth was a garden, a place of perfect harmony and effortless abundance. The forbidden physics of the 364-day year suggests a physical mechanism by which this global paradise could have literally and scientifically existed. The story of a lost Eden is not just a theological memory, it may be a geological one. If the primordial Earth was a paradise of perfect physical and temporal order, a world with a stable 364-day orbit, then we are confronted with an unavoidable question. What broke it? What catastrophic event possessed enough power to physically alter the orbit of a planet, to knock it off its axis, and to shatter the perfect clockwork of the solar system? The answer cannot be found in the natural processes of geology or astronomy. The answer, as the ancient texts testify, is found in the cataclysmic consequences of the First Cosmic War. Let us return to the story of the first and greatest rebellion. The prophet Isaiah describes the fall of Lucifer in violent astronomical terms. He is the son of the dawn, a celestial being of light who is cut down to the ground. The Gospel of Luke preserves a stunning and cryptic statement from Jesus Christ himself. In chapter 10, verse 18, Jesus declares, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." This is not a gentle, allegorical description. It is a description of a sudden, violent, and unimaginably powerful event. The fall of a being of Lucifer's rank and power was not a quiet, spiritual demotion. It was a cataclysm. It was an event that, according to many ancient traditions, had profound and devastating physical consequences for the entire created order. This is the forbidden hypothesis. The event that we call the fall of Satan was not just a spiritual event. It was a physical one. It was a cosmic impact event, a celestial cataclysm of such magnitude that it literally shook the foundations of the solar system. It was this event, this Luciferian cataclysm, that physically knocked the Earth off its perfect perpendicular axis, creating the 23.5-degree tilt that we have today. It was this event that perturbed its perfect 364-day orbit, stretching it into the slightly chaotic 365.25-day ellipse that we now inhabit. The shattering of God's perfect clock was not a metaphor, it was an act of war. The rebellion in heaven left a literal physical crater in the physics of our world. With this understanding of a primordial Luciferian cataclysm in place, we can now return to the crime scene of Genesis 1:2 and see it with a new and terrifying clarity. The state of tohu vabohu is not just a description of a world that has been judged. It is a precise, technical description of a world that has been physically and temporally broken. It is a world that is suffering from the direct physical aftermath of this cosmic impact event. Consider the description again. The earth became tohu vabohu. It became a ruined and desolate wasteland. This is the predictable geological result of a planet being knocked off its axis. Such an event would trigger global earthquakes, volcanic eruptions on a scale we cannot imagine, and a complete and catastrophic disruption of its climate. The world would be literally and physically laid waste, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. The cataclysm would have thrown unimaginable amounts of dust, ash, and debris into the atmosphere, creating a thick, impenetrable shroud that would block out the light of the sun and plunge the entire planet into a profound and lasting darkness. And finally, the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. The axial tilt and orbital disruption would have caused the primordial oceans to come out of their basins, triggering a global flood, not the flood of Noah, but a far older, far more chaotic flood, the flood of Lucifer. This is why the earth is described as a dark, waterlogged ruin. Tohu vabohu, therefore, is more than just a legal term for a world under judgment. It is a scientific description of a world in a state of post-cataclysmic shock. It is a world whose geography has been shattered, whose atmosphere has been poisoned, and most importantly, whose very relationship with time has been broken. The planet was no longer in sync with the perfect 364-day rhythm for which it was created. It was a world plunged into a state of both physical and temporal chaos. And it was upon this broken, wounded, and disharmonious world that God would begin his great work of restoration. The evidence is now laid before us, painting a picture of a universe that is both scientifically coherent and theologically profound. It is a story of a primordial, physical perfection, a catastrophic, cosmic rebellion that had real, physical consequences, and a divine act of restoration upon a broken planet. And so we must ask the question that lies at the heart of every investigation we conduct. If this story is so powerful, so cohesive, and so deeply embedded in the textual clues of our most ancient records, why was it suppressed? Why did the later gatekeepers of faith choose to erase this entire history of forbidden physics? The primary motive was a strategic and deliberate shift in the very nature of the story of the fall. The uncensored chronicle, the one that speaks of a Luciferian cataclysm and a shattered planet, is a story about cosmic physics. It tells us that the fundamental problem of our universe is that the very hardware, the physical and temporal architecture of creation, has been damaged by an act of celestial warfare. But this is not a story that is easy to control or to build an institution upon. It is a story of vast, impersonal forces and ancient cosmic events. And so, the gatekeepers made a choice. They performed a masterful act of narrative reduction. They took a story that was about physics and they transformed it into a story that was solely about morality. They shifted the entire focus of the fall from the primordial cosmic rebellion of Lucifer to the later, smaller and far more manageable rebellion of Adam and Eve in a garden. The problem of the universe was no longer a broken clock, it was a broken rule. The source of the world's chaos was no longer a catastrophic impact event, it was a bite of a forbidden fruit. This move was brilliant in its simplicity. It took a complex cosmological problem and turned it into a simple human-scale ethical problem. And in doing so, it created a version of the faith that was far less concerned with the physical restoration of the cosmos and far more concerned with the moral management of the human soul. Beyond the strategic desire to create a simpler, more moralistic narrative, there was a second, more profound and perhaps more understandable motive behind the suppression of this forbidden physics. The gatekeepers were afraid of the implications of a broken universe. The story that the uncensored chronicles tell is a story that is, in many ways, deeply unsettling. It suggests that the fall was not just a spiritual event with physical consequences, but that the very fabric of the physical world, the very laws of nature, were themselves casualties of the cosmic war. This is a terrifying idea. A stable, predictable, and divinely ordered physical universe is a source of immense psychological and theological comfort. It is the stage upon which the drama of human redemption can safely unfold. The idea that this stage itself is broken, that the planet we live on is a wounded and limping version of its former self, that the very time we measure is a fractured echo of a more perfect rhythm. This is a truth that can inspire a profound sense of cosmic instability and anxiety. The gatekeepers, in their role as the pastoral guardians of the faith, likely made a calculated decision that this truth was simply too much for the average believer to bear. They wanted to present a world where the physical creation remained good and perfect, a reliable backdrop against which the moral drama of humanity could play out. They feared that to admit that the planet itself was a victim of the fall, that its very orbit and axis were a testament to a primordial violence, would be to open a Pandora's box of theological problems and existential fear. And so they chose to hide the evidence. They chose to spiritualize the fall, to confine its effects to the human soul and the moral realm. They created a narrative where the hardware of the universe remained intact and only the software of human morality had been corrupted. It was a safer, more comforting and less chaotic story to tell. But it was a story that could only be maintained by actively suppressing the physical and astronomical evidence that the ancient texts themselves provided. The final and most tragic consequence of this act of censorship was the transformation of the 364-day calendar itself. In its original, pre-Adamic context, as we have hypothesized, this was not a religious invention. It was a physical law, a direct and literal reflection of the celestial mechanics of the primordial world. It was a piece of scientific data. But once the history of the cosmic cataclysm was suppressed, once the memory of the original perfect orbit was erased, the 364-day calendar was left stranded, an artifact disconnected from its physical and astronomical context. It became a theological puzzle. The later scribes and priests knew from their own observations that the solar year was 365 and a quarter days. Yet their most ancient and sacred texts spoke with unwavering confidence of a perfect 364-day year. How could they reconcile this discrepancy? Unable or unwilling to confront the staggering possibility that the physics of the universe itself had been altered, they were forced to reinterpret the calendar. And so a physical law was demoted to a religious rule. What was once a scientific description of reality became a ceremonial or ritual calendar, a purely symbolic system that was to be used for religious purposes, even though it did not perfectly align with the natural world. It was no longer seen as a description of what is, but as a prescription for what should be observed in a purely religious sense. This is the state in which we find it today, a strange, seemingly inaccurate calendar preserved in the pages of a few forbidden books. And because it no longer perfectly matches the physics of our fallen and broken world, the modern gatekeepers, both religious and secular, have used this very discrepancy as proof that the calendar must be a primitive and fanciful invention. They have taken the clearest evidence of a broken universe and, in a moment of profound and tragic irony, have used it as a weapon to dismiss the very texts that describe how the universe was broken in the first place. This uncensored physical history of a broken universe does not contradict the New Testament. It provides the very cosmic context that makes some of its most profound and mysterious statements intelligible. In his letter to the Romans, in chapter 8, the Apostle Paul makes a stunning and sweeping declaration about the state of the entire created order. He writes, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." For centuries, this has often been interpreted as a beautiful but purely poetic metaphor. We are taught that creation groans in a symbolic sense, longing for the final redemption of humanity. But with the restored history of the Luciferian cataclysm in hand, we can now see that Paul may not have been speaking metaphorically at all. He may have been describing a literal, physical and geological reality. The groaning of creation is the sound of a system that is out of alignment. It is the sound of a planet that has been knocked off its perfect axis and is now subject to the stresses and strains of an unstable orbit. The pains of childbirth are not just a literary device. They are a precise description of the physical consequences of this primordial wound. The earthquakes that shake our planet, the volcanoes that erupt with violent fury, the hurricanes and tsunamis that rage across our seas, these are not just natural disasters. They are the groans of a wounded world. They are the physical, geological echoes of the ancient violence that shattered its original, perfect harmony. Paul's theology is not a detached philosophical system. It is a diagnosis of a physical condition. He is testifying that the fall was not just a spiritual event that affected the human soul. It was a cosmic event that affected the very atoms of the universe. He is confirming the ancient truth that we are not living in a perfect world that has been slightly marred by human sin. We are living in the ruins of a broken one, a world that is literally and physically groaning, waiting for the day when the Creator himself will step in to heal not just our souls, but the very planet beneath our feet. This understanding of a physically broken and temporally disrupted world solves one of the most persistent and nagging puzzles surrounding the 364-day calendar. If the true solar year is 365 and a quarter days, why would a perfect and all-knowing God command his people, as he does in the books of Enoch and Jubilees, to follow a calendar that seems, on the surface, to be inaccurate? Why would he insist on a system that would inevitably, over time, drift out of sync with the very seasons it was supposed to mark? Was God making a mathematical error? The answer, in light of the cosmic cataclysm, is a profound and beautiful no. The command to observe the 364-day calendar in a 365.25-day world was not a mistake. It was a memorial. It was a deliberate and constant reminder of the perfection that was lost. Imagine being an ancient Israelite living according to this sacred rhythm. Every single year, you would experience a temporal dissonance. Your calendar, the perfect calendar of God, would conclude, but the sun, the great clock in the sky, would continue its journey for another day and a quarter before completing its own, now damaged, cycle. That annual discrepancy, that slight but persistent mismatch, was not a flaw in God's law. It was a feature. It was an annual calendrical sermon. It was a tangible mathematical reminder that the world you were living in was not the world as it was originally designed. It was a constant testimony that the earth itself was out of step with the perfect rhythm of heaven. Every year, that extra day and a quarter would preach a silent, powerful message. This world is broken. This is not our final home. We are living in a fractured reality, and we are waiting for a future restoration when the heavens and the earth will once again be brought back into perfect, harmonious alignment. The 364-day calendar was not meant to be a perfect calculation of a broken world. It was meant to be a perfect memorial of an unbroken one. This understanding of a physically broken cosmos, a world whose very temporal physics were catastrophically damaged in the primordial fall, gives a new, literal and breathtaking power to the ultimate promise of the entire biblical narrative, the promise of a new heaven and a new earth. For centuries, and particularly in the more philosophically driven traditions of the West, this promise has often been spiritualized. It has been interpreted as a purely metaphorical description of a future, disembodied heavenly state, a place where our souls will be morally perfected, but which has little to do with the physical, material universe. But the uncensored history of a world that was physically broken suggests a restoration that will be far more than just a spiritual one. It will be a physical, cosmological, and architectural one. When the final chapters of the Book of Revelation promise a new heaven and a new earth, it is not just promising a change in our moral condition. It is promising a complete and total restoration of the very hardware of creation itself. The prophets of the Old Testament spoke of this physical renewal. Isaiah speaks of a day when the wolf will lie down with the lamb, a restoration of the natural order. Peter, in his second epistle, speaks of the current heavens and earth being destroyed by fire to be replaced by a new heaven and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. This is not the language of metaphor. It is the language of cosmic re-engineering. It is the promise that God will, at the end of the age, perform a final cosmic act of healing, a divine reboot that will restore the entire universe to its original, unfallen, and physically perfect state. What would this look like? It would mean the healing of the planet's scarred geology, the end of the groaning that Paul described. But more than that, it would mean the restoration of its temporal perfection. It would mean the realignment of the planet's axis, the recircularization of its orbit, and the triumphant return to the perfect 364-day celestial clockwork that Enoch himself witnessed in the functioning of the heavens. In this new heaven and new earth, there will be no more jarring and extreme seasons, no more catastrophic storms, no more groaning of a planet that is out of sync with its own internal design. The new creation will not just be a world without sin, it will be a world without axial tilt. It will not just be a world without tears, it will be a world without leap years. The ultimate promise of the Bible is not an escape from the physical world into a spiritual dreamscape. It is the complete and total physical restoration and glorification of the material world. It is the promise that the final act of God will not be to throw away his broken clock, but to repair it perfectly and to invite us to finally live forever in a universe that is in perfect, harmonious, and mathematical sync with its creator. In the midst of this grand cosmic story of a perfect order, a catastrophic shattering, and a future total restoration, there is one element of the divine rhythm that was never broken. While the annual cycle of the earth was disrupted, while the 364-day year was transformed into a fractured and limping approximation of its former self, the weekly cycle, the 7-day rhythm, remained intact. This is a theological detail of profound and critical importance. The 7-day week is the one piece of the primordial divine clock that has survived, unaltered, from the first creation. It is a temporal constant, a rhythmic fossil that has been preserved perfectly in the midst of a broken system. Unlike the day, which is governed by the rotation of the Earth, the month, which is governed by the orbit of the Moon, and the year, which is governed by the orbit of the Sun, the 7-day week has no astronomical or natural basis. It is a purely divine institution, a rhythm that was established by the Word of God alone in the first chapter of Genesis, and it has never been lost. Through the rise and fall of empires, through the changing of calendars, through the shifting of cultures, the 7-day week has remained as a steady, unwavering, and universal pulse. It is the one unbroken thread that connects our own chaotic post-fall reality with the perfect, harmonious order of the world before Adam. The Sabbath, therefore, is more than just a day of rest. It is a weekly act of temporal remembrance. It is a conscious and deliberate choice to step out of the broken, linear time of the fallen world and to step back for a single day into the perfect, cyclical time of the first creation. It is the one remaining, fully functional piece of the original divine technology, and its preservation throughout all of human history is a testament to the faithfulness of a God who, even in the midst of a broken world, has left us a permanent and repeating reminder of the perfect order to which we will one day be fully restored. The uncensored history of the forbidden physics of the pre-Adamic world does more than just solve the puzzle of the 364-day calendar. It forces us to confront a reality that is deeply uncomfortable for the modern, materialistic mind. It proves that the spiritual and the physical are not two separate, disconnected realms. On the contrary, they are profoundly and inextricably intertwined. A great spiritual act of rebellion in the heavenly realms had a direct, measurable, and catastrophic effect on the physical laws of the solar system. This is a truth that shatters the very foundations of the modern scientific worldview, which is built on the assumption that the universe is a closed, material system governed by impersonal and unchanging laws. The story of the Luciferian cataclysm is a declaration that the laws of physics are not, in fact, the ultimate authority in the universe. They are subordinate to a higher spiritual law. They are the bylaws of creation, and they can be and have been altered by the decrees of the cosmic government. This knowledge calls us to a new and more profound way of seeing the world. It is a summons to look beyond the veil of physics, to recognize that the material world we see, touch, and measure is only one layer of a much deeper, multidimensional reality. It teaches us that the great events of spiritual history are not just abstract theological concepts. They have real, tangible, and sometimes violent consequences in the physical world. The war in heaven leaves scars on the planets. To live with this understanding is to live in a world that is once again enchanted, a world that is saturated with a meaning and a purpose that transcends the mere interaction of matter and energy. It is to know that our spiritual choices, our acts of worship, of prayer, of obedience or rebellion, are not just private internal events. They are acts that resonate in a universe where the spiritual and the physical are one. This is the ultimate forbidden physics, the knowledge that reality itself is a theological construct. This restored, uncensored history of a physically broken universe offers us a revolutionary new framework for understanding the long and often bitter conflict between science and scripture. For centuries, we have been presented with a false choice. Either we must accept the scientific account of an ancient, evolving universe, or we must accept the biblical account of a young, recently created one. This perceived conflict has caused a crisis of faith for many and has allowed the gatekeepers of secularism to dismiss the Bible as a primitive and scientifically illiterate text. But the history of the forbidden physics of the pre-Adamic world reveals that this is a false dichotomy. Science and scripture are not two competing and contradictory witnesses. They are two corroborating witnesses, testifying from different perspectives to the same single catastrophic event, a cosmic fall. Modern science, with its tools of geology, astronomy, and paleontology, is a meticulous and brilliant study of the universe as it is now, in its current, fallen, and broken state. It is a forensic investigation of a crime scene. It can measure the elliptical orbit. It can calculate the axial tilt. It can dig up the fossilized bones of the creatures that lived in the world that was. Science is a powerful witness to the effects of the cataclysm, but the sacred texts, the uncensored chronicles of Enoch and Jubilees, are testifying to something that science can never see. They are a witness to the world as it was originally designed, in its state of primordial physical perfection. They are the eyewitness accounts from before the crime, the records that describe the original, perfect 364-day orbit and the divinely ordered harmony that once existed. They are not enemies. They are two different experts called to the stand in the same great trial. Science is the forensic examiner describing the broken body in exhaustive detail. Scripture is the character witness describing the vibrant, perfect person that the victim was before the crime was committed. To pit them against each other is to miss the point entirely. Together, their combined testimony provides a complete and coherent picture of a universe that was once perfect, was catastrophically broken, and is now groaning, waiting for its final restoration. And so, we are left with the subtle but profound evidence of this cosmic fall, a scar that is written not in stone, but in time itself. The difference between the perfect primordial 364-day year and the broken current 365.25-day year is not a large one. It is a little more than a single day. But in that small, almost insignificant discrepancy, in that slight, persistent and clumsy limp in the gait of our planet, lies the entire tragic story of a cosmic rebellion. That extra day and a quarter is the weight of sin. It is the temporal echo of a primordial cataclysm. It is the mathematical signature of a universe that has been knocked out of its perfect, divine alignment. Every time our civilization is forced to add a leap day to its calendar, every February 29th, it is an unconscious act of acknowledging this ancient wound. It is a global admission that the clock is broken, that the arrow of time was fractured, and that we are living in the patched-up, improvised aftermath. This is a truth of profound and humbling significance. It means that the evidence of the fall is not just a theological concept found in a book. It is a physical, astronomical, and calendrical reality that we experience with every single trip our planet makes around the sun. We are living in the temporal debris of a cosmic war. The 364-day calendar, therefore, is more than just a historical artifact. It is a standard of perfection, a gold standard of time against which we can measure the fallenness of our own reality. To remember its existence is to remember what was lost. It is to live with a constant, sober-minded awareness that the world we inhabit is not as it was meant to be. It is to feel the weight of that single, extra day and to long for the day of final restoration, when the heavens and the earth will be renewed and the clock of God will once again run with perfect mathematical and uninterrupted precision. To awaken to this forbidden physics, to understand that we are living in the physical and temporal aftermath of a primordial cosmic shattering, is to be given a profound and deeply practical framework for understanding our own lives and struggles. It is a truth that can cultivate in us a unique and resilient form of faith, a faith that is not surprised by the brokenness of the world because it understands the ancient origins of that brokenness. When we experience the chaos of our world, the natural disasters, the political turmoil, the personal tragedies, we are no longer forced to ask the agonizing question, why would a perfect God create such an imperfect world? We know the answer. He didn't. The world he created was one of perfect, harmonious order. The world we are living in is the damaged, post-cataclysmic version, a world that is still groaning under the consequences of a very old rebellion. This does not excuse the evil and suffering, but it gives it a context. It places our personal struggles within the grand, epic narrative of a fallen and groaning creation. This understanding breeds a unique form of patience and endurance. We are no longer expecting this broken system to provide us with perfect peace, perfect justice, or perfect health. We recognize that we are living in a compromised reality, a world that is fundamentally out of sync. Our hope is not in the political or social reform of this broken system, but in the promised future restoration of all things. To live in the echo of the shattering is to live with a sober-minded realism. It is a faith that is not easily shaken by the chaos of the world, because it knows that chaos is the predictable symptom of the world's ancient wound. And it is a faith that is not just waiting for an escape to a distant heaven, but is actively and hopefully awaiting the day of the great cosmic repair. The day when the divine physician will heal not just our souls, but the very physics of the universe he created. Our investigation is now complete. We began with a single provocative question about a strange and seemingly inaccurate ancient calendar. We followed that thread of inquiry from a question of ritual to a question of physics, from a matter of worship to a matter of cosmic war. We have seen the testimony of Enoch, who toured the celestial machinery that runs the divine clock. We have dared to hypothesize that this clock was not a metaphor, but a literal, physical law of a primordial and unfallen world. We have identified the Luciferian cataclysm, the first great cosmic rebellion, as the catastrophic event that shattered this perfect order, knocking our planet off its axis and breaking its perfect temporal rhythm. We have exposed the motives of the later gatekeepers who, in their fear of a broken universe, chose to suppress this physical history and transform a law of nature into a mere religious rule. And in doing so, we have assembled a more complete, more coherent, and more awe-inspiring picture of the God of the Bible. He is not just a God of morality, he is a God of mathematics. He is not just a God of theology, he is a God of physics. His creative genius is not just poetic, it is architectural, mechanical, and precise. The story of creation is not just a story of divine speech, it is a story of divine engineering. And the story of the fall is not just a story of a broken rule, it is the story of a broken universe. This is the complete physics of God, a science that is far grander, far more ancient, and far more intertwined with the spiritual battle than we have ever been led to believe. The greatest constant in the universe is not the speed of light. It is the faithfulness of a creator who designed a perfect order, who, in his sovereign wisdom, allowed that order to be broken to honor the terrible beauty of free will, and who has promised, in the fullness of time, to restore it to a state of glory that will surpass even its original perfection. We do not live in a random universe, a chaotic accident of matter and energy. We live in a wounded universe, a broken but beautiful creation that is groaning, waiting, and destined for a final and total repair. The 364-day calendar is the fossilized echo of that original perfection. Our own, slightly fractured 365.225-day year is the constant, ticking reminder of the cosmic price of rebellion. And the promise of a new heaven and a new earth is the ultimate hope that the clock will one day be made whole again. This is the forbidden physics of the world before Adam. It is a truth that does not just change the way we see an ancient calendar. It changes the way we see time itself, the nature of our world, and the epic scale of the story we are in. And so the final question is not one of science, but of perception. Now that you have been shown the evidence that the very laws of time may have been physically altered by an ancient cosmic rebellion, how does this change the way you see the chaos of the world we live in today? Let us know in the comments below.